It's important to note that we're all in transition pretty much all of the time. Listen, when it comes to having clarity, it's great to have a sense of direction in life, i.e. roughly where we want to be or where we want to go. It's fantastic having goals and aspirations and dreams and hopes. We might even, at some point, have kind of crafted a full kind of life plan or something like that in response to kind of documenting every single outcome that we hope to generate in every single area of our life. And all that's fine. It's all great. But what must precede all of this is developing an understanding of our motives, i.e. what drives us. You know, the reasons why we want what we want in life. I remember about 12 years ago having a conversation with an old mentor of mine, and I used to be one of these really high energy guys. Have you noticed that I'm still quite high energy today? And I've got a very, very fast-paced mind. So I always had ideas, you know, literally 100 different ideas a day. And sometimes I would end up kind of, you know, committing to various ideas. I would get started, then I would burn out, and then I would kind of move on to a different idea. Then I would commit to that and then get bored and burn out. And I understand that this is how many people live the entirety of their lives. They start projects with the best of intentions, but then just don't see them through to completion. Can you relate? So having a conversation with this mentor, and it was a lady, a very, very wise lady here in Scotland, and she said, "Kane, you're so driven." And I said, "Yes, I am. I'm super driven. I'm like proper motivated. You know, there's loads of great things I want to do." I think back then I was saying things like, I want to be the next top entrepreneur in Britain and all that sort of thing. And she said, "It's fantastic. I can tell you're very, very motivated, very, very driven, but I wonder if I could ask you a question." I said, "Yeah, go for it. What specifically is it that drives you?" Oh, there was the $1 million question. So yeah, I'm very, very driven, but when I was asked what specifically it is that drives me, I was absolutely stuck for words. Now we understand, don't we? And we have kind of discussed this briefly, that, you know, people are motivated and driven by different things, right? What I like to do is sometimes differentiate between primary motivations and secondary motivations. For example, some people might say they're motivated by making money, or they're motivated by success, or they're motivated by getting 1 million likes on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, or something like that. And some people view these things as being primary motivations. But I like to just state that they are not primary motivations. Think about it. Would you like $1 million? If someone was to come along and say to you, right, I will give you $1 million for a week's work, and this week you will work 24 hours a day, 100% effort, and that's it. You're going to most likely say, yeah, absolutely. You'll probably be pretty driven that entire 7 days, even if you get pretty tired, right? Most people would. But then if, you know, you were asked, okay, so if you can give one good reason, one solid reason, why and how it is that your life would benefit from $1 million, what would you give? You see, a lot of people look to money, materialistic possessions, items, homes, experiences, a means by which to, on some level, kind of like validate their own worth. Some people confuse their net worth for their self-worth. Some people draw their self-worth as human beings from how much money they have in the bank. And these are not particularly stable grounds to build and base our lives upon. I remember back, I think it must have been in 2003 or 2004, or was it 2005? I can't quite remember. The housing crash, here in the UK anyway. If we remember back, we know that many of the bankers had been obviously governed by greed, for many, many years, and they were essentially lending out more money than what people had the capacity to pay back. So what had ended up happening, without going into the economics of it all, was the market crashed. So house prices had literally been increasing and increasing and increasing for quite a number of years. And then the bottom dropped out of the market, which meant that some people had a huge portfolios of properties, so huge amounts of debt. And many people were kind of buying properties to rent them out. The problem was when the bottom dropped out of the housing market, the value of properties dropped, and people ended up stuck with all this debt. Some people got into a bit of a pickle, as it were. Now, around about the same sort of time, there was a lot of people around the world literally lost their wealth overnight. I remember reading a couple of articles. There was a French money manager, and he was a financial advisor to kind of various royal families around the world, and he had an estimated net worth of something like 1.2 billion. And it was all kind of caught up in various investments and bonds and stocks, and he literally lost everything overnight. He was found around about 4 days later with a noose around his neck, hanging in his own garage. There was another guy, I think he was the CEO of one of the banking groups, was it Lloyd's TSB? Can't quite remember his name. I'm pretty sure it was. And again, there was many accusations. He was one of the guys behind, I think, the driving, these kind of high rate loans, and he was kind of really advocating lending people more money than they could afford to get back, governed by greed. He got caught out. I think he was married, had a couple of children, and again, a few days later, after this whole thing had kind of come to light, he was found again in his garage of his car with a hose pipe attached to his exhaust in his window, and he fumigated himself to death. And it's funny, isn't it? Well, it's not funny, it's actually really quite sad that many people place their own personal value, if you like, or determine their own personal value upon how much money they have in the bank. And money is not a good motivator. It really is a very corrupt motivator. Now, don't get me wrong, if you were to ask me, Kane, would you like £1 million? I would say absolutely. And if you were to ask me why, so well, what can I do with £1 million? I don't need it. Would I like it? Of course. I see money as nothing more than an enabler. I have a vision. I have some goals. I have kind of the next 10, 20, 30 years planned out if I live that long. I want to launch a community learning centre here in my own hometown. Very much like to launch this as a pilot, if you like, get the community model working, and then roll it out, kind of like in the same way you would roll out a franchise throughout the entire nation. It's a goal that I have. It's an ambition. Don't need to give you any more details off that. But I share that with you to show that it's possible to be motivated by what we can do with the money rather than just by money. And that's the difference between a primary motivation and a secondary motivation. So I work very, very hard. All right, and I do work very, very hard, and we generate quite a lot of money. And I'm working towards these primary goals. And making money is a secondary goal so that I can fulfill my more important, meaningful legacy goals. Does that make sense? Just want to give you a bit of an example of the difference between primary and secondary motivations here. Right? I want to help you understand you. I want to help you understand what it is that motivates and drives you, because some people say that they are not motivated, and I beg to differ all of the time. All people are motivated all of the time. It's just that being taught motivation, values, priorities, wise decision making, it's something that there is no mandate in most societies that drives us to be taught in schools, unfortunately. So many of our emerging younger generations get taught a second language. They still get taught Pythagoras' theorem. They might get taught some arithmetics, and they might get taught a little bit about William Shakespeare, which is nice, but they don't get taught basic human skills such as communication skills, social skills, how to make wise decision making, strategic thinking, critical thinking, which obviously serve people in life. Right, we shall not go into that any further, but that's why I like to really emphasize the importance of understanding our motives. It's understanding the difference between our needs and our wants and our preferences. So let's come back to the £1 million. £1 million. Would you like me to give you £1 million? Do you want £1 million? And of course, I don't think there's going to be too many people shaking their heads saying no. Most people are going to be saying, yes, please, I would very much like £1 million. How about if I was to reframe the question just a little bit and say, do you need £1 million? Do you need, if you were to be honest, do you need £1 million? Your answer is going to most likely change now just a little bit, because I want £1 million. I would love someone to give me £1 million today, but I don't need someone to give me £1 million today, because the truth of the matter is that whilst we don't always have everything that we want in life, We always have everything that we need. And the reason why some people become so desperate in life is because they fail to appreciate that which they have. Many people focus on that which they want rather than being grateful for that which they already have, which is essentially all that they need. Let us unpack this in a little bit of depth. See if we're going to establish what it is that you can and cannot live without. Now, back in the 1940s, there was a psychologist called Abraham Maslow. I've kind of talked much on Abraham Maslow's teachings over the years, and he came up with this psychological theory called the hierarchy of needs. And what he proposed was that we have different levels of motivation in life. For example, a person who is financially destitute is going to most likely be motivated by something very, very different than what someone who is financially affluent would be motivated by. For example, someone who's broke is going to be very, very motivated by sourcing enough revenue to pay for food, water, clothing, shelter and warmth. Basic fundamentals, necessities of staying alive. Maslow referred to them as our physiological needs. But the funny thing about needs and values is that our priorities change throughout life because life is a big transition. And as we meet certain sets of needs, our priorities change. And this is where many people get stuck, all right? Because their lifestyles change, but their priorities don't. And this is why some people end up hugely imbalanced. For example, I've known people in their 20s, in their early 30s, to commit to really high-profile, demanding careers, and they make a lot of money, and it's great. And doing that sort of thing's fine when you're young. When you're single, perhaps, if you don't have other responsibilities, such as you're not married, you don't have kids. I think I mentioned earlier on, I spent a number of years working as a coach. I'd work with many directors and CEOs and corporate high flyers and self-made millionaires and entrepreneurs and sometimes fathers or sometimes mothers with problems. And within a certain generation, again, I grew to identify a certain trend. And this was that people of a certain generation will have spent many years, perhaps 2.5, 3 decades working to make money. And they don't have a mortgage, they've paid off all their debts, they've got huge pension plans behind them, savings accounts full, they've got more than enough money to essentially take the next decade off work if they want. But they reach a certain milestone, mid-40s, 50s, maybe mid-50s, they wake up one morning and realise that they've spent too long climbing the wrong mountain. What they actually needed to have done was change their priorities many years ago. And this is kind of what this Abraham Maslow's psychological model allows us to understand. He said that, we might be motivated by one set of drivers at one stage of life, i.e. food, water, clothing, shelter, warmth. But then once we have our basic necessities met, we become motivated then by perhaps security. Maybe getting some savings behind us, clearing off our debts, maybe getting some insurances in place, paying off a house. But then what happens if all that is then accomplished? The next natural kind of step in our evolutionary ladder will be to find a relationship, start a family, put down roots, build some social connections. And this is where many people fail. Because they start the family, they get married, but they carry the same lifestyle habits with them from when they were younger into married and family life. And how many people do you know who compromised or jeopardised or completely undermined the relationship that they had with their kids or their spouse for that career or for that next promotion or for that next paycheck or for that next pay rise or for that next commission or dividend or whatever? And this is a mistake. It's a huge life mistake that many people make. I've worked with so many people who end up in their late 40s or 50s having been divorced, they become estranged from their kids, and they prioritise the career for just a little bit too long. All right, we need to give these things some thought. Even if you are watching this in your younger years, right? It's fine being driven and hugely motivated by you building a life for yourself for so long, But the second you commit your life to someone else, unless this other person gets the best of you, you're going to lose them. All right? You're going to lose them. And if your kids don't get the best of you in the younger years, by the time they get to around about the age of 10, that's it. The boat has sailed. You've missed the opportunity. So some people spend their whole years driven by ego, by making a name for themselves, developing a reputation. Right? This would have been the next run in the ladder in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy. And I remember having a conversation with a gentleman. We're talking a published author, respected entrepreneur, if you like, in his early 90s. And he had prioritized his academic career his whole life. From the age of, mid-30s, and he'd written books, and book after book after book, and he'd spent the last 20 years traveling the world, speaking to, groups of people and individuals and organizations on a global scale. And here he was in his 90s, and he's got all these books, and he's got all these papers, and people know who he is. He's a relatively respected man for what he's done academically, but relationally, he just missed out on marriage. Just kind of passed him by. He missed that boat because he was too busy traveling the world, doing his career vocational thing. Never met that right person, and he got into his 50s, and that was it. And that was the chance of meeting someone who'd be able to bear him children. He missed that, and he just kept on going, never slowed down, never changed his priorities, and here he was in his 90s, still trying to make a name for himself and still wanted to write that next book. And he was still writing about academia, but he didn't have anything else to share, i.e. no experiences of a balanced life, family, raising kids, sustaining a healthy marriage, fostering a home. And it's sad because some people spend their whole lives, and I'm saying spend, not invest, some people spend their whole lives climbing a mountain only to reach the top and realise, life has passed me by. Life has passed me by. So, there are some things that we can and cannot live without. I just want to share with you a few ideas here. I want you to respond to these kind of sources of motivation by responding whether these things are something that you need, whether these are something or things that you just want, or whether the things that you would just find preferential. Preferential, you want, or you need. And see if you can just gauge the difference between the three. Because there are some things that we would prefer, there's some things that we really, really want, and then there's some things that we really, really need. All right? And it's those things that we really, really need. They're the things that we really cannot live without. And unfortunately, many people end up missing out on the things that they really, really don't want to live without because they become so transfixed and focused on these secondary goals and secondary motivations, i.e. the things that they just want. Alrighty, so let us think about goals and objectives. Goals and objectives. Right? There's an old saying that a person without a vision for their life will perish. Think about what perishing is. Perishing is kind of where we just feel stuck in a rut, going round and round in circles, kind of like we're living for nothing, like we're living a meaningless existence, and kind of like we're going nowhere, right? So, many people become motivated by their goals and objectives. Now, I don't know whether you have any major goals or objectives. You may not. I'm certainly not here to help you set goals, right? But I'm here to help you understand what it is that's motivating you and driving you so you can get clarity. Because if you don't understand this, then you stand at risk of compromising your own personal effectiveness. Right? People can only be effective in life once they are essentially meeting their needs on a values level. Many people kind of miss this boat because they become distracted by so many other lesser things. So goals and objectives, are these something that you need in your life? Or are they something that you just want in your life? Or are they something that you would prefer to have in your life? How important is it that you have goals and objectives? And there's no right wrong answer here. There's just your honest answer. Because this will, on some level, help you to get a little bit clear on what's actually really important to you. Having goals and objectives. How about purposeful work? Right? How about it's just engaging in really purposeful work? maybe kind of serving your community, going overseas and doing some sort of goodwill work, voluntary work. I've got no idea what would be meaningful for you. Teaching for me is meaningful. I get to influence people like you who might go on to influence other people. It means that I have a bit of a ripple effect going on with my life. For me, that's meaningful, right? So I engage only in meaningful work. I could not live. I would not want to live, right? I need to be doing something meaningful. Purposeful work isn't just something that I want to do, it's something that I need to do. Otherwise, life just isn't life for me. Goals and objectives? For me, I like to have goals and objectives. I like to have goals and objectives. I always like to have something that I'm working towards. But the way in which I live my life, I just focus on doing my best today, right here, right now. I like to use what I have in my hand to the best of my ability, whatever that looks like. Right? I don't like a rigidly bound life. I know many people live their lives bound to their diaries, to-do lists and all that sort of thing. Me, I've not had a diary for years. I value freedom, time and space freedom, which means there's a lot of people that want to speak to me, right? But very, very few people ever do actually get to speak to me. Why? Because I will never take bookings or appointments, right? That's not what I want in my life, right? Don't want it. And this is a beautiful thing about values. Once we're clear on what we want and what we don't want, well, we get to then set our own rules, right? We get to bring clarity and definition into our own lives. Do you see the importance of this? All right? You don't need an academic education here to get clear on what you want more of in life. You just got to get clear on what you want in life and then prioritize these things. So I prioritize meaningful work. Rewards. What? Trophies? Certificates? Accreditation? What? Praise from other people? I don't care about these things. I have no interest in these things, but yet I understand that some people literally devote their entire life to these things, kind of like the 92-year-old man that I referenced just a few moments ago. Right? For him, his primary goal was the rewards. It's the recognition. All right? The recognition for his life's works. He wanted this legacy. For me, I don't care. I'm engaging in purposeful work every single day. Right? If something happens, right, and I end up dying tomorrow, I end up croaking it, if I'm lying on my deathbed knowing that I've got 5 minutes to live, I'm going to ask myself some questions such as, right, what could I have done differently? What mistakes have I made? Maybe in my 30s, I spent a little bit too long, probably focused and prioritised the career a little bit too long, longer than what I should have done. If I could go back, I would have started a family earlier, right? That's one regret. But other than that, no regrets whatsoever. Every mistake, every hurdle, every lesson learned, every blow, going back 15 years ago, I bankrupted myself. Do I regret that? No, I've learned from absolutely everything, right? So it's not the rewards, it's not the prestige, I don't care about these things, it's the lessons that I learn along the way, right? Do I need the lessons? Yes, if I'm lying on my deathbed. Do I have any regrets? Would I care about having more rewards? Would I care about, I should have set better goals and objectives? I guess when we're lying on our deathbed, we kind of think, did I do something meaningful with my life? Did my life count for something? Did it stand for something? All right, so I'm here to get you thinking just a little bit. Meaningful connections. All right, I would absolutely hate to be on my deathbed. Now, I have no connection with my father whatsoever. It's not because he's a bad man, he's not a vindictive man or anything like this, just very thoughtless. All right, he spent my whole upbringing working away from home. I just never knew the guy. When he came home on weekends, if he did come home on a weekend, he was tired, generally unavailable. So I left home at the age of 16 to join the military, having never forged a meaningful connection with him. So today, in my 40s, don't get me wrong, I love the guy, but we're not friends. We don't have any connection. We haven't spoken for years, and it's not because we hate each other or anything like this. It's just we've got nothing in common. If I was in that position, I would be absolutely devastated. Everything that I've devoted the last 15 years of my life has been to putting in place a financial foundation and stability so I can do family, so I can, sustain a healthy marriage with my wife, so we can live autonomously, we can do what we want when we want, And it's not about us having time off and gallivanting around the world, right? Why? Because, my life wouldn't be complete without engaging in purposeful work. But I need those meaningful connections as well. And this is where some people fail. Because some people will commit to having a quantity of people in their life. I don't. I've only ever got usually a small handful of people in my life, but they're quality relationships. Right? I understand you can only have so many quality relationships. Why? Because everyone's on their own path. In life, people blow into our lives, they blow up, they blow out, they sometimes blow back in again. Some people love us when they're getting what they want from us. Then the second we stop giving them what they want, they hate us. We become like Satan in the flesh. People become venomous. All right? I spent most of my 20s being so naively generous without boundaries, boundaryless generosity. And this is where I would literally give to people, I would give people handouts, I would give people my time. And did I ever get anything in return? No. With so many of these people, I found it so hard. It was kind of like, if I'm going to be completely honest here, I would have spent most of my 20s trying to buy friendships, trying to buy relationships. I don't know if you can relate. By saying yes to people, by meeting people's demands, by being appeasing to people. And in time, people would like me. Or did they like me? Or was it just that they liked what they got from me? Because I don't have too many of these people in my life today when I start saying, no, you can't have any more. And this is the thing. Meaningful connections are those individuals who are there through thick and thin, not just when they're getting what they want from you. All right? Makes sense. So the question is, meaningful connections. Do you actually need them in your life? Do you just want them in your life? Would they be nice to have? Or would you, just kind of preferential? Maybe someday if you ever get round to it. Because some people, don't get me wrong, will engage in purposeful work for decades and never forge those meaningful connections. All right? Everything in life is a trade-off. We've got to get clarity in this stuff. We've got to understand what's driving us because we can't have it all. Right? You can't go left and also go right. You can't have your cake and eat it. You sometimes can't engage in an entire life of purposeful work or pursuing goals and objectives and also forge meaningful connections. You just can't have it all. All right? We can try to have it all. Good luck with that. We can only ever focus our effort and attention on one area at any one given moment in time. All right? Determination. Do we need determination? Do we want determination, or is determination preferential? Well, I guess it depends on what you want, or what you need, or what you'd like, or what you don't want. Because some people are pretty determined to completely undermine their life. For example, we've looked over the last 20 years, the increase in the number of mental health conditions, for example, that have been invented. All right, there are a lot of people out there who will say, I am mentally unwell. And to be honest with you, come on, I'm not saying this is true for all cases, but in many cases it's convenient, isn't it, to be mentally unwell? Because there's a whole lot of people out there doing work that they don't find meaningful, that they don't want to be doing. So when if one gets diagnosed as having stress, then one gets to take 6 months off work, usually on paid leave. And I'm not kind of generalizing people here, but I used to keep company with a guy who lived in Edinburgh. He was in the police. And he hated it. He hated the police. And he'd been off sick with stress for over 2 years, paid by the taxpayer. And I knew the guy. And you might think, but the guy maybe had a real disorder. Well, anytime I spoke to him, he was fine when in my company, but he hated his job. But he committed to this job that he didn't find purposeful, that he didn't enjoy. I could recall to that back in the days of the military. For the last 2 years of my kind of military career, I hated it. The thought of going back, living in a barracks, just kind of living in barrack rooms with lots of other guys. I had no space, no time, up in the morning at a certain time, getting told what to do, told what to dress. There was no freedom in this. My ability to live life in an autonomous way was completely crushed. It wasn't okay with me. And until I realized I want my freedom, all right, I was crushed with stress, doing something that I didn't want to do. But what was it prioritizing? Well, I was prioritizing the wage. I made the wage the number one priority. ended up compromising my own contentment, fulfilment, and peace in life through the process. So what I'm saying is, our motives drive every single decision that we make. Every single one. How about new challenges? Before we come on to new challenges, some people are pretty determined to stay on the path that they're on, even though it's not serving them in any way whatsoever. Right? For example, criminals, people who break the law. All right? Think about many of these kind of rioters smashing up various cities in America back in 2020. Some people were saying, we want justice. Some people were saying, we want justice, and some people genuinely did want justice. There was other people out there saying, we want justice, whilst smashing up their own hometowns and cities. They didn't want justice. Looting isn't about wanting justice. That's wanting a free ride. That's wanting to take something and get something for nothing. It's called consumerism. It's called theft. It's called complete cultural irresponsibility. Right? Can you see the difference? New challenges, new opportunities. What happens when we get new challenges and new opportunities? Well, some people, challenges come their way and, oh, I'm depressed, life's tough. Well, it depends whether one actually wants to grow and progress in life. But if we're looking for opportunity, then opportunity can only be found in new challenges. All right? Opportunity can only be found in new challenges when change comes into our life. And if you think about what opportunity brings, well, yeah, opportunity and new challenges will often bring uncertainty. Sometimes we've got to take a risk. But those things also bring about excitement into our lives. Excitement into our lives. Right? So the question is, excitement, is that something that you actually need in life? Or just something that you want? Or just something that, you prefer, but you're not bothered either way? Again, there's no right or wrong here. Right? It's just an exercise to get you thinking about what actually drives you. What is the driving force behind your decision-making processes? This is all that you need clarity on. Once you're clear on what's driving you, then you're not going to have a problem getting out there and making wise, well-informed decisions. Some people out there are driven by support or encouragement, right? And I've put this kind of thumb here. What does that represent? Likes on Facebook, on social media, TikTok, YouTube, right? Many of our emerging generations literally spend their lives in front of a mobile phone screen, right? So they don't forge any meaningful connections. They compromise meaningful connections for support or encouragement or thumbs up and likes, right? My wife and I, Karen, we've kind of seen this for years now, and it's so sad. Groups of sometimes young people, sometimes even families, parents and kids, they'll go out for a Starbucks or go to a local cafe and you'll see them all sitting around the table. They're just sitting there on the mobile phones. 4 people sitting opposite each other on the mobile phones. And then one of them says, let's take a selfie. So they all stop what they're doing. They all kind of get behind the camera, take the photograph, and then they're back to the mobile phones again. Listen, this is where our global society and culture is at. All right? Don't think it's not going to influence your family, because it's going to. Don't think it's going to influence those people that you have in your life, because it already has. All right? So, if we don't have meaningful connections, we're going to be driven by support or encouragement. Why is it that the mental health industry is so rife today? Why is it that so many counselling organisations are booked up 12, 18 months in advance? We're talking human beings, right, waiting 18 months for a meaningful conversation with a person who's just gonna listen to them. That's all that counselling is. I'm trained in counselling. This isn't just an opinion, right? I have more qualifications in counselling than what most people have had hot dinners, just saying. All right, so I know what I'm talking about here. Right? But we find it. People lining up to speak to the therapist or the counsellor. Why? Is it because they have an abundance of meaningful connections, or is it because they don't? All right, so people go for support and encouragement because of the lack of meaningful connections that they have. And where do the lack of meaningful connections come from? Well, people don't have the meaningful connections that they want because they over-prioritise either purposeful work, goals and objectives, pursuing rewards, the next opportunity, new challenges, or being really determined in some area, all of which can be really good things. but all of which could also be highly detrimental if we aren't living life in a balanced way. All right, and that's the main idea that I want to share with you here. All right, just to get you thinking before we kind of evolve. Values and priorities are not bad. They're not detrimental. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just that when our priorities are imbalanced, or if we are not consciously giving consideration to, if we're choosing to go left, well, what are we missing out on that is right? If we're choosing to go up, well, what might we be missing out on down here? If we're choosing and prioritizing the career, the work, chasing that next paycheck, well, what's getting missed out on? Is it the marriage? Is it the relationship and the connection with the kids? Is it the family? Is it the what? Are we committing to a job just to make that paycheck that we're not passionate about, just for that paycheck, for a little bit of security and comfort? Everything in life is a trade-off. All right? And there is no one in this world who can tell you how to make the right decisions. All right? All that you can do is make the best decisions that are right for you, based upon what you understand as being your primary drivers and motivations.